Hey, it's Rosella Ide White, your Love Big coach, and I'm coming to you on this Thursday, May 7th, 2020, because it's kind of a special day in my life. It is the anniversary of the release of Love Big, my first solo book project, and I'm feeling all the feels, right? So, those of you who have been a part of my life and my community know that this has been and was a labor of love that went over the course of 3 years of writing and working on. And it came out, and it was less than ideal circumstances when it was released. It was released 2 days, 3 days after my dear friend Rachel Held Evans died. And that significantly shifted the trajectory of my own advertising of the book, promotion of the book, and even feeling like I could celebrate the book. Um, there's been so much written about Rachel this last week because she is our guiding star, our North Star, our guardian angel in this season, and was someone that so many loved and respected and followed because of her grace and her wisdom and the ways that she was able to remind us constantly of God's expansive and inclusive table. And I, like so many others, have mourned her and will continue to mourn her, um, especially around this time of year. And as we think about all she was and all she still had yet to give, but all that she gave while she was here. And also the fact that her words keep speaking, right? That's the beauty of writing, of creating art, of putting things out in the universe, is that you live on long before or long after you take your final breath. So, I just wanted to start off by, sharing my love and respect and absolute care for her and her family. And it is the anniversary of my book release, right? So, Love Big was the book that I knew that I had to write. I have so many ideas and so many things that I talk about. And when it came time to actually put pen to paper, if you will, right, to start actually writing a book, I knew that I wanted it to be about the thing that is most important in my life, the thing that I have struggled to find within myself, the thing that I have been enamored with my entire life, and that thing is love. Um, and growing up, I was a romantic, right? And I think I still am a bit of a romantic. But growing up, when I thought about love, I thought about romantic love, romantic relationships, and thought that that was the thing that was the ultimate expression of love. And thank God for growth. Thank God for healing and transformation and experiences that taught me that limiting love to romantic relationships is actually limiting the power of what love is and can be. And so in the book, I talk about how love, right, is present where there is creativity, where there's liberation, and where there's sustenance for the heart, mind, body, and soul. And I believe this with every shred of my being, right? Love is not a feeling. Love is an action. It's a verb. It's a force. It is the thing that is concerned with the other, with the self, right? And I talk about nurturing love that is life giving and justice seeking and sustaining. And I think in this first anniversary of the book, that is something that I want to invite people to, right? That I did not write a book that was about romantic love or about just friendships or relationships, but it was about this love that flows out of my understanding of God the Creator. And it flows through us and it empowers us to be people who seek justice, who fight for life, for abundant life, who are advocates and seekers of liberation, and who also are healers, healers of self and healers of their families and healers of their communities and ultimately healers of the world. Because I believe that love can heal the world. Like the thing that I was teased for my entire life is the thing that I've learned is my superpower. I believe that love can heal the world. And over this last year, I've gotten to reflect even more, not only on the words I wrote, but on how I understand love and the ways in which I want people to be invited to consider love in their own lives. And so I am a signatory with the Revolutionary Love Project, which was founded by Valerie Kaur. And it's about creating and sustaining a love ethic in the world and in movements for justice. And it aligns beautifully with what I hope this next chapter of Love Big to be about, which is not just about falling in love with self, which I think is necessary and foundational, or loving other people, which is what we're here to do, but about sustaining a way of being that is undergirded by an ethic of love. So, one of the things I wanted to do today was read from my last chapter of Love Big, which is entitled Love Big and Heal the World. And in this chapter is where I actually get to what I hope to be the next movement, right? The next iteration of this work. So, I'm going to read from chapter 8 of Love Big. And I'm going to make some invitations at the end of this, but listen to these words. The key to creating health is figuring out the cause of the problem and then providing the right conditions for the body and soul to thrive. This is a quote from Dr. Mark Hyman. I've spent a lot of time in hospitals, working as a research assistant at one of the hospitals in the Texas Medical Center the summer before my junior year in high school, serving as a hospital chaplain for a year in Atlanta, and caring for relatives after major procedures that required long hospital stays. Hospitals have taught me so much about the creativity of the human mind, the strength of the human heart, the power of the human body, and the resilience of the human spirit. Some of the most important lessons of my life I learned from hospitals, from patients, and from medical professionals. One of the most profound lessons came when I took the time to understand the science behind wound care and healing. From witnessing hospital staff care for a patient with burns to watching my father provide wound care for my grandmother, I learned that the healing process is painful, long, and requires intentional care. It often seemed as if things got worse before they got better, with the cleaning of the wound bringing about significant pain and discomfort. Before healing can happen, cleaning the wound, also known as debridement, must first take place. This is done to remove anything that stands in the way of healing, dead tissue or foreign objects found in the wound. Cleaning can include the use of chemicals, baths, and even scraping with instruments. I can remember holding my grandmother's hand as she had a leg wound debrided. It was painful and far from pretty. She suffered and the wound looked worse before it got better. Cleaning the wound can only happen when a patient is ready to accept that the wound exists and is in need of care. Until that moment, the wound festers and can lead to infection that, at worst, can kill a person. Only when a person is ready to get the care they need can the process of healing begin. Humanity is sick, and this sickness has shown itself through the wounds of brokenness and disconnection. For so long, we have tried to ignore the wound, and it has gotten worse, spreading to healthy tissue and infecting our lives together. Foreign objects, here the isms, including racism, sexism, classism, ableism, have to be removed from our wounds for us to experience healing. So many of us feel as if things are getting worse and not better. We are wondering which news stories or scientific discovery or poverty statistic will finally be the one that leads us to do something about our political leaders, climate change, and the lack of access to resources. This book is an attempt to provide what's needed to heal our wounds, but this can only happen if we are willing to do the work. This work includes accepting our woundedness, connecting to a creative, liberating, and sustaining faith that can restore us, engaging the healing process by falling in love with our whole selves, and forming revolutionary relationships. At times in our history, we have attempted to clean our communal wounds. Every time there's a justice uprising, from the civil rights movement to Black Lives Matter to Me Too, that's an attempt to clean our wounds and seek healing. Leaders throughout history have called out our wounds and turned our attention to the deep-seated illness that threatens to overtake us. There's momentum for the moment, but we often can't sustain it because we haven't done the foundational work of falling in love with ourselves and with each other. We haven't engaged a life-giving faith that has the power to sustain us. We rely on the emotions of a moment to keep us committed to the eradication of the disease, but these emotions burn hot and fast. Recognizing and cleaning the wound are the first steps, but it's not enough. In order to experience restoration, healing, and wholeness, we have to root out what is causing the disease in the first place. We have to engage a healing process to make sure that the wound fully heals and that healing isn't set back. This requires even more work, time, and intentional care. Without this time and care, amputation is the next option. Cutting away the diseased tissue to save the larger organism is a drastic measure that happens when the wound does not heal. And if that still doesn't work, quality of life quickly deteriorates and death is inevitable. I recently heard an episode of the Marie Forleo podcast featuring Dr. Mark Hyman. This podcast is one of my favorites because it invites various people from diverse fields into conversation about their lives and how they found meaning, connection, and success. In this particular episode, Hyman, the founder of the Ultra Wellness Center and the medical director at Cleveland Clinic Center for Functional Medicine, described the concept of functional medicine, which was a new term to me. He explained that in our society, medicine has mainly served the purpose of curing disease rather than creating wellness. We treat people once they show signs of disease, but we don't pattern our health care around creating environments, practices, and beliefs that take into account the interdependent reality of our lives and biology. This leads us to constantly be behind the proverbial 8 ball. We are always playing catch up, focused more on the disease than the situations that cause the disease. We spend more time on band-aid solutions than we do on transforming people's beliefs and environments so that health flourishes. This doesn't just apply to our health. Throughout our society, we tend to focus on short-term solutions rather than long-term well-being. In many spaces, especially within communities of faith, we aren't focused on creating and maintaining wellness. We are focused on the diseases and problems present in our context. We are more concerned with our declining numbers and resources than we are with the fact that people are fundamentally disconnected from themselves and each other. We are more concerned with our buildings and reputations than we are with the decreasing relevancy of our communities and practices. We would rather conserve a former way of being that we revere than creatively imagine and embody a new way, one that is more reflective of the diversity, inclusivity, and justice of God. We aren't focused on the wellness or the prevention of disease. We are focused on staying afloat, ignoring the root causes of our problems. I often wonder whether we even want to be made well. Do you know what wellness looks, feels, and sounds like? It's hard to imagine something if you've never experienced it or come into contact with its power. We can't begin the healing process if we don't admit our woundedness. Only then can we shift our focus from prevention to creation. Only then can we heal the world. The wound healing process includes 4 phases: hemostasis, inflammation, proliferation, and maturation. Simply put, the first phase, hemostasis, is when the wound closes, which happens when blood clots. Inflammation is the second phase and happens when localized swelling occurs, which prevents infection and controls bleeding. Proliferation involves scabbing. The wound is rebuilt with new tissue and new blood vessels. Lastly, in the maturation phase, the wound fully closes, scabs fall away, and the skin, which is healed, is weaker than it was to begin with. This process has much to teach us when we think about our wounded world today. Ordinary moments present extraordinary solutions. We simply have to look at, listen to, and learn from the beauty and wisdom around us, which is divinely created and inspired by the ultimate lover, God. Tapping back into God's power gives us the vision we need to see the world anew and view her through the lens of love rather than fear. Using the wound healing process as a guide, we have a roadmap for healing that changes us all. The first phase is hemostasis, to stop the bleeding. Blood is our life force. As long as it flows unencumbered and is not infected, it keeps us alive and well. We are currently bleeding out. Our life force is seeping out of us, and the bleeding must be stopped if we want our wounds to heal. This requires miraculous power, which can be tapped into when we turn our lives over to a God that wants nothing from us but love and love in action. This God, this faith, and love in action can make us well. The bleeding is stopped when we deeply root ourselves into our creation story, into the story of life being made in the image of God. When God breathed into humanity, God gave us life. We stop the bleeding by applying the pressure of our faith. When we remember who and whose we are in ways that inspire us to call out anything and everything that tries to take our life force from us. This faith gives us the courage to stand up and speak out in the face of injustice. Our blood clots when the collective community applies pressure on the forces that try to divide us from each other. We see it happening all around us today. There is a lot of injustice, but there is a lot of pressure. We are rising up and speaking up and taking a stand against the injustice that threatens to rob us of our life force. Whatever the issue may be, violence against women and girls, police brutality, mass incarceration, income inequity, homelessness, the degradation of our planet, when we apply pressure to our wounds and take a stand, we experience healing. Engaging in creative acts that liberate ourselves and others provides sustenance for our lives together. The second step is inflammation, protecting the area. Once we've stopped the bleeding, we continue to apply pressure and we turn inward, rooting out anything that isn't uplifting, empowering, and nurturing within us. When I speak of protection here, I'm not talking about separating oneself in order to maintain a status quo. We protect ourselves and our communities by taking time to fall in love with ourselves. And with our faith as our guide, we begin to imagine a new reality. This stage invites us into new ways of viewing ourselves and the world around us, but it is hard. Whenever we are required to change, we also enter a time of grieving. Grieving who we were, what we believed, and sometimes relationships that were not meant for the next chapter of our life. In this stage, we seek out information that challenges previously held beliefs. We reflect on our lives, on what has formed and informed our thinking. We examine our thinking against a new fundamental truth. God is the ultimate lover, and we were created to love. Do previously held ways of being and believing support this truth? If not, we shift and sift, asking the divine guidance and connecting with others who are living out a love ethic. We address our own woundedness and the things that have broken our hearts. We make peace with our past, recognizing that we can't change what's happened. Our bodies become not just an arbitrary vessel, but a reflection of the divine, one that needs to be loved and nurtured in order to be well. And when we view our bodies in this way, we are led to see the humanity of others' bodies. Our souls come out of hiding and we pay heed to their wisdom. Once we stop the bleeding, we do the work of connecting to ourselves. We then move outward to create a new reality. And that's the third step, proliferation. Create a new reality. A new reality is created when people engage in revolutionary relationships, relationships that are life-giving, risk-taking, vulnerable, gracious, forgiving, diverse, and accountable, have the power to make us well. But before they make us well, they challenge us to embody a different way of being. When we engage in revolutionary relationships, we can no longer live life in a bubble of comfort or ignorance. By their very nature, these relationships draw us out of ourselves, leading us to care about the things that the people we are connected to care about. These relationships tilt our world on its axis. My relationships have not only enriched my core, they have led me to learn new lessons about life and love and joy and pain. These relationships have opened me up to new sources of knowledge. I care about those who are Latinx, South Asian, LGBTQ. I care about the things that impact people who are not from my country. I care about populations that I've never lived with simply because of these relationships. The people in my life have reflected God's divine creativity, and by being in relationships with them, I have experienced God in new ways. Not only do these relationships increase my knowledge and expand my compassion, they also lead me to action. I take up causes and speak out about things that impact the people that I am in relationship with simply because I love them and because they bear the image of God. To not do so would be to turn my back on God. The fourth stage is maturation, living the new reality. The healing process is complete when we put our values and our love into action. Each and every day, we are called to make intentional choices that reflect the lover, our relationships, and the things that matter most. Every action and choice is measured against our new awareness and commitments. This is an incredibly difficult undertaking, and it's no wonder we haven't experienced true healing yet. But I do believe, without a shadow of a doubt, that it's possible. The faith that I profess points to a God who became human precisely to show us how to live within a new reality. In the incarnation, God shows us a level of love that we had not witnessed before. God sought us out to be in revolutionary relationship with each other, with each of us, so that we could love big and find healing together. This isn't easy and requires us to take some risk. I did that recently, and my life was forever changed. In April of 2016, I found myself at a crossroads. I was working for my denomination at the national headquarters 1 year after Dylann Roof murdered 9 Black people at Mother Emanuel AME in Charleston, South Carolina. The massacre of Cynthia Marie Graham Hurd, Susie Jackson, Ethel Lee Lance, DePayne Middleton Doctor, Clementa C. Pinckney, Tawanza Sanders, Daniel Simmons, Sharonda Coleman Singleton, and Myra Thompson rocked me to my core. Not only did this tragic event happen on the heels of years of killings of Black and brown people, it was perpetrated by a young white man who was affiliated with my denomination. I was an outspoken leader in my denomination on issues of race and justice. I wrote about the massacre and how I felt being a Black member of a predominantly white denomination. I shared how my heart was broken after years of working towards racial justice and education in my denomination, only to find that we were raising white young adults who had the power and desire to violently kill people who looked like me. I was exhausted. I was overwhelmed. I was heartbroken and had no idea of what God was calling me to. I knew with every fiber of my being that my current role was no longer the right place for me. The work that I was doing did not reflect my deepest values. Our bodies give us clues all the time. They tell us how we are feeling and what we need. I was paying attention to my body in ways that I hadn't before, to the energy coursing through her and the emotions that were vibrating beneath the surface. During this time, a key thought kept emerging. Rosella, you are not living out your values, and your body is suffering from this dissonance. I knew that it was time to make a change. Was the work that I was doing inherently bad or wrong? No. But the work didn't reflect my identity or my values. When we become comfortable in our bodies, we begin to make decisions that honor who we are and what we value. We begin to live our values out loud, and that's when we see love in action. But love is really more of an interactive process. It's about what we do not just feel. It is a verb, not a noun. Do you remember the first time that love shifted in your life from being a noun to a verb? When love shifted from being merely a feeling of impassioned action that required intentional work and commitment? Do you remember when love became something that you'd fight to keep rather than a fleeting desire? Every revolutionary relationship represents this type of love. Love as an interactive process. I have deep and abiding feelings of respect and compassion for the people in my life, but our relationships go beyond feelings. They move to a place deep within that is reflective of the love that God models for us in the incarnation. They represent a certain witness, the constant presence of a person who has committed to me and our relationship. Revolutionary relationships lead me to action. I must nurture these relationships and the people I love. I can't be selfish because these relationships continually pull me out of myself and into the world. That's what God's love did. God's love for humanity was so powerful that it pulled the divine being from the heavens and to earth to be with us. In Jesus, we see a God who was so in love with us that it's impossible to stay away. I'm Christian because of Jesus, because in Jesus, I encounter a love and a God that is constantly seeking us out. Jesus is love in action. The very act of the incarnation is God showing us a new way of living and being in relationship, powered by love that is revealed in revolutionary relationship. When we embody the love that Jesus modeled, we can't help but care for those on the margins. We must speak up and speak out against systems and institutions that oppress others. In the embodiment of this love, we recognize our wellness is directly tied to the wellness of each member of humanity. When one is sick, we are all sick. When one suffers, we all suffer. When one is well, we are all well. When we embody the love of God as revealed through the person of Jesus, we model this love with our whole being. To love big is to invite people to be made well, and this wellness has profound implications on our personal lives, our collective lives, and our world. In order to create wellness, we have to first address the symptoms and the causes of our diseased lives. Nothing can happen if we don't admit that we are wounded. Once we recognize and embrace our woundedness, we can begin the process of healing. This healing begins with falling in love with ourselves and a holistic practice of love, one that infiltrates our mind, heart, body, and soul. This leads us to live and love differently. We engage others in ways that bring about creativity and liberation, sustaining us on this journey. And these relationships bring about a deep, transformative healing. This process is difficult, but we don't do it alone. We do it in relationships with others, in revolutionary relationships. This way of being challenges so many beliefs and ideas about how we should interact. This new world order moves us from being people who act upon others to being people who love one another, live with each other, and recognize our interconnectedness. When I love big, I recognize that the wellness I seek lies in how I love myself and how I love others. It lies in the wholeness of the community. It lies in the justice found when I take up the concerns and struggles of my neighbors. It lies in the original goodness that is reclaimed when we recognize ourselves and others as made in the divine's image. To love big is to recognize the inherent worth of everyone and to realize that the most important work to be done is the work of relationship. This leads to a fundamental shift in worldview so that all experience liberation today, here and now. When we love big, we reflect the divine lover in our acts of creativity, in our work of liberation, and in how we sustain our relationships and the creation that God herself crafted. We love big when we fall in love with ourselves, rouse our minds, reform our bodies, and restore our hearts. We love big when we engage in revolutionary relationships and seek holistic healing as individuals and as a community. To love big is to remember the beginning of our story, a story that reflects a God in revolutionary relationship, forming creation to experience and reciprocate love that leads to restoration, healing, and wholeness. That is from chapter 8 of Love Big, The Power of Revolutionary Relationships to Heal the World. I just wanted to share this with you today and hopefully provide some encouragement. I mean, who would have known that when I wrote this a year ago, we would be in a global pandemic, right? All of the plans that I had to celebrate the year anniversary of the book also did not happen. And so I am readjusting and thinking through how to best continue the Love Big movement. But I know without a shadow of a doubt that I have been called to love and to love deep and wide and big and well. So I'm looking forward to continuing this work, specifically through my coaching, through engaging folks with the written word, and through some exciting projects that are coming up, right? So in this moment, I would just invite you, as someone who is figuring out how to be in this moment, right? How to show up in this present moment, to not neglect yourself, to spend some time getting to know the you that is only the you that you could know, right? And this time gives us an opportunity to do that. I invite you to fall in love with yourself because falling in love with ourselves, I believe, becomes a precursor for deeply loving others. And I invite you to love others, to actually engage in the embodied work of being for another. I know that showing up is not necessarily something we can do in ways that we've done in the past, right? We may not be able to protest or to go to someone's house or to spend time in groups. But we can reflect and we can read and we can write and we can advocate and we can pray with and for and we can check on and we can learn about. We can do so much that's an act of loving the neighbor right now. It's a scary time. And I hear it. I hear it in my clients. I hear it in my family. I hear it in my friends. And I hear it in myself, right? Not only do current events impact us right now, but all the other shit of life that hasn't stopped is still going. And sometimes this moment has made the other stuff of life, the other shit of life, even harder. And so I just want to encourage you. I invite you um, to sign up to receive love notes from me at Love Big, um, my Substack page, lovebig.substack.com. And I also invite you to purchase Love Big wherever books are sold. You can order it online. You can support your independent booksellers. We love independent booksellers. And shout out to Blue Willow Books here in Houston. But support your local independent booksellers and order the book. There's also a free study guide that's available on my website, rosellahwhite.com/lovebig. And I would love to engage you in conversation about how you are crafting your love ethic, how you are nurturing life giving and justice seeking and sustaining love in your life, and how you're loving yourself. I love you.